Welcome back to the most accurate podcast here, 4for4 Football. As always, for the Waiver Wire preview show, I'm your host, John Daigle, where today we will be discussing and highlighting the Week 12 Waiver Wire article on 4for4.com right now. The drop list, as always, free for all, followed by prioritized overall rankings, positional rankings, and sorted for injuries and the fantasy playoffs, since we're getting to that time where we're also trying to stash players ahead of weeks 15 through 18. Before we begin, though, reminder, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Sleeper.com, one of the fastest growing customizable fantasy football platforms in the industry. And when I go to the Sleeper app on my phone and I click team and add players at the very top, this week, for some reason, Treylon Burks is still available in 60% of sleeper leagues. I'm guessing because this is a short week. Nonetheless, we have now seen him return in week 10 with a 16.6% target share, his first game off injured reserve at that time. But then more importantly, in an island game against the Packers last Thursday, a team high 27.5% target share on the third most routes run among Tennessee's receivers. I'm not even suggesting, since Mike Vrabel is so stubborn, that Burks will actually move into two wide sets over one of Robert Woods or Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. What I am saying, though, is that these past 2 weeks, with Burks at full strength, not even working in two wide sets, he's earned a target on an elite 27.9% of his routes run. So not only is there meat on the bone, not only does he have a favorable fantasy playoff schedule against the Jaguars, Chargers, and Texans sandwiched in between weeks 15 and 18, but also he's accomplishing this, going of 100 yards against the Packers as the third wide receiver on the team. So there is a lot more room to grow, even if it's an off chance. So wherever Burks is available, it is the time of the year where we are splurging all of our FAAB because we can't take it to the grave with us. So Burks is a 80 to 100% FAAB player wherever he may be. This week's sleeper pickup, though, for deeper leagues, because I am assuming Samaje Perine, who is still available in 88% of sleeper leagues, is also available in your league. Because we saw, even with Jameson Williams active as Cincinnati's third running back in place of the injured Chris Evans on Sunday, Perine out-touched Travion 13-3 once Mixon exited with a concussion in the second quarter. We've seen how concussion protocol works, and rightfully so, since the two-way injury in the league. So I'm guessing Joe Mixon, at the very least, will be out this upcoming week. And honestly, short-term production for Perine may be questionable against the Titans, since Tennessee is still permitting just 3.7 yards per carry and has allowed the third fewest fantasy points per game to enemy running backs. At the same time, we saw Perine, who is typically the team's receiving back anyhow, not only score 3 receiving touchdowns, but we also know Joe Burrow is targeting this backfield at the league's eighth highest rate. So even if we don't get there with Perine in week 12 from the ground, we expect him to offer a high floor as a low-end RB1 through the air as a receiver. Thus, we are still bidding quite a bit of FAAB, especially if we roster Joe Mixon for week 12 and moving forward. As always, you can head to Sleeper.com for the latest app downloaded on your phone today. Let's discuss what's going on with the Chiefs wide receivers, because Juju Smith-Schuster and concussion protocol. We expect him to be back for week 12, but touch and go. Kadarius Toney left in the first quarter early on Sunday night against the Chargers because he was hampered with a hamstring injury, and Mecole Hardman, who's dealing with an abdomen injury, we know, is on injured reserve for at the very least in the 3 games. So what we saw with all of that happening was Justin Watson lead the Chiefs with a route on 97% of Patrick Mahomes' dropbacks. Also recorded a team-high 85 air yards, 26% of the team's air yards to be exact. And now we have an incredible spot at home in Arrowhead against a hapless Rams team who are 14-point dogs per Vegas early in the week. It is an amazing spot, as it always is, for the Chiefs passing game. But if Juju's going to remain out, if Kadarius Toney's going to remain out, and Mecole Hardman, as we know, is out, Justin Watson is there for the taking, and he's available in 94% of sleeper leagues. So I know he's out there for you as a short-term option. Sky Moore did see 2 more targets than Justin Watson in this game. But Sky Moore also a route on less than 50% of Patrick Mahomes dropbacks. And more importantly, we've seen time and time again, unless you are biased, that Sky Moore is the one that very clearly falls off and is always replaced by the next wide receiver, whereas Justin Watson continues playing over him. So Justin Watson is the short-term player we want if these injuries hold for the Chiefs. Their injury reports, of course, pending. Another player I think is a strong short-term answer is Demarcus Robinson, because you may look at this week's team-high target share and think that's just what Robinson has done. A blip on the radar, 1 game. But quietly in Baltimore's last 3 games, without Rashad Bateman, Demarcus Robinson has a 22.1% target share and has finished as the wide receiver 35, wide receiver 71 against the Saints when he went to that game injured before the bye. And this past week, the wide receiver 7 of week 11. Not only that, but if you look at our schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed tool, projecting for the fantasy playoffs at 4for4.com, you will see in weeks 15 through 18, the Ravens are projected with the easiest schedule for wide receivers. So not only do we get a short-term option who is very clearly leading the Ravens wide receivers in targets as the de facto replacement for Rashad Bateman, as the past 2 games alone, Devin DuVernay, a gadget player, has 2 total targets. That's it. We also get Demarcus Robinson in a soft fantasy playoff schedule. So not only a plug and play for week 12, but an amazing option, wide receiver 3, flex option down the stretch for us if you are dealing with injuries or bye weeks and need that help. If you do not plan on starting Demarcus Robinson, the long-term stash, if you're prioritizing a high upside player, would be Jameson Williams, who I am admittedly worried about returning from injury. But we do know Williams designated to return from injury reserve. The Lions have the next 21 days to activate him or lose him for the rest of the year. And more importantly, at least in week 15, we do get a soft Vikings defense, allowing the 3rd highest rate of explosive passes of 15 yards to be completed. Also the 6th most fantasy points per game allowed to opposing wideouts. So if you're not going to start Demarcus Robinson, or you're not going to start Justin Watson in the short term, taking a chance, a lottery ticket on Jameson Williams is just fine, knowing that we are swinging for the fences with that player anyhow. If you are also dealing with injuries, for better or worse, the seas have parted for Latavius Murray as a plug-and-play RB2, because Chase Edmonds now, we expect to be out for the foreseeable future with a high ankle sprain, and Melvin Gordon outright cut after a fumble he did not lose, but yet another fumble on the season. And that led to Latavius Murray this past game against the Raiders, handling 17 carries, which is a new high for any running back in any game for the Denver Broncos this year. Marlon Mack and Devine Ozigbo, if you remember those names, do sit behind Latavius Murray. But what this tells us, at least for the short term, that Latavius Murray gets to be plugged in week 12 against the Carolina front 7, allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Thus, a very strong option we can play immediately if we have the injuries and need the help. This part of the show is usually where I rattle through a handful of deep cuts. But rather than giving you fish on this short holiday week, I'm gifting you a fishing pole, because all of the deep cuts, per usual, are in the waiver wire column. And just in case you don't have access to that waiver wire column, just know we are now running a 75% off sale. And it's easy. All you have to do is go to 4for4.com and use the promo code NEXTLEVEL. And that takes off an extra 25% from a sub, any sub of your choosing, which is already 50% off for the rest of the season. Promo code NEXTLEVEL. Deep cuts for the waiver wire. It lets you also access the Discord where we are talking about deep cuts and everything else for the waivers every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Not only that, but shows and extra DFS content for Thanksgiving as well. So on this short week, the fishing pole for you is next level. We will be back on Wednesday with a free show on the 444 YouTube page. Myself, John Paulson, and Sam Hoppin previewing all the Thanksgiving games, start sits, and week 12 overall. But until then, promo code next level and be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you then.